Hello and welcome to another episode of In Orbit. It's the podcast exploring how technology from space is helping empower a better world. Brought to you by the Satellite Applications Catapult. I'm your host, Dallas Campbell. And hey, guess what? It's our series finale. I'm going to be sitting down here for a one-to-one with the Chief of External Affairs at the Satellite Applications Catapult. It's Mark Saxon. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Welcome to the season finale.
It's a big deal.
Well, I suddenly thought, it's going to have to be especially good we want top-level jokes.
I'm feeling the pressure.
Top-level chats.
I'm feeling the pressure.
Exactly, the pressure is on. Mark Saxon, Chief of External Affairs, which sounds very grown-up at the Satellite Applications Catapult. You're a geneticist, you told me earlier.
Yeah,
How does
that's
a
right.
geneticist end up to be head of space marketing?
Yeah, happy accident, I think. I've just always tried to do the next thing that seemed interesting.
Yeah.
So after...
It's kind of a leap of...
It is. After 15 or 20 years of doing healthcare policy and comms and life sciences stuff, the nice people here got in touch and I thought, that sounds really interesting. That'd be a nice change.
Yeah.
So yeah, two years ago, just about, I made the move over and it's been really interesting. There is a happy sort of intersection with life sciences every now and then. So I know you've spoken to people before, but there is a bit of life sciences around microgravity research.
Oh, that absolutely is. Of course there is.
So occasionally I kind of get to dip my toe back into my old world.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a big jump.
I always worry about, I hear news articles about the International Space Station and they're growing crops. I mean, we're slightly away from life sciences, I know.
Yeah.
They're kind of, and it's like, we're growing lettuce on the International Space. I'm like, is that all we've got to eat? Is like lettuce on our Mars journey. I was like, look, we've got lettuce.
I know. What are you showing me by doing this? What have you proven? Yeah.
But it is a big thing, obviously, life sciences in space for the future.
Yeah, it seems to carry a lot of potential, actually. Yeah.
Amongst other things. Hey, I suppose just before we get into the politics of it all, how important is sort of marketing for UK space? I always kind of refer to, my mum always asks, she has no idea about what's going on in space. So I kind of worry about, are we marketing properly? Are we doing it better? How should we be marketing space in the UK? Yeah,
it's a really good question. I think if you go back to your classic definitions of marketing and advertising and communications, I would say what space needs to do is tell stories, probably tell better stories.
This is what I bang on about the whole time.
So it's less, for me, marketing is transactional. It's basically trying to sell you something. Yeah. I think we need to tell stories. So at the Catapult, for example, we're here to help businesses grow and by doing that, help grow the economy. We do that by helping those businesses break down the barriers that are holding them back. So we need to understand their story. We need to understand what they're wrestling with and see if we can help them.
Well, let's talk about politics and the sort of government involvement in space. And I suppose actually, while we talk about NASA, space and governments have always been hand in hand.
Absolutely.
Since the very beginning, space was always a very political area. And I suppose it still is. But why is it important, particularly now, do you think? Like what's the kind of landscape looking like? What's going on?
You're exactly right. I think government space has always been a government endeavour.
Yeah.
Up until maybe 10 or 15 years ago, where you'll hear people talking about new space. So this moved to a more commercial approach to space, where it's kind of more businesses operating. But government remains highly relevant because it's still setting policy by and large and strategy, has a huge effect on regulations directly. So who gets to launch a spacecraft and what can they do with it when they're up there, but also regulations that affect the use of those spacecraft, the data and the technology they provide. So environmental regulations, sustainability regulations, they affect companies as well.
And I suppose space is part of our national infrastructure, critical infrastructure. So it has to be, government has to kind of have a handle on what's going on.
Completely. And then government's a customer. It's probably still the biggest customer for space data and technology. And we can talk about that, but I think, it could probably be a better customer.
Governments be better?
I think it could be a bit more efficient in the way it buys some of the things it buys.
International
relations, still a big deal.
Defence as well.
Defence is huge.
Yeah, we should talk about.
This year it's the Council of Ministers, so the ESA meeting where all the ESA members get together and decide what budget they're putting in and what they'd like to spend it on.
How does it work? Did government say, right, this is what we're going to do in space? I mean, there was I think it was it 2021, there was the big kind of document like, right, this is what's going to happen in space. But then governments come and governments go, and administrations come and go. I mean, I look what's happening in America and NASA at the moment, and it's utter chaos.
Yeah, and that's very politically driven. Yeah. So the National Space Strategy came out in 2021. I think that set some objectives and what the politicians like to call a direction of travel.
Yes.
I think if there was criticism of that, it was that there wasn't enough detail in it. So it gave you a sense of what government was trying to do, but it didn't really spell it out. So that was followed up by the Space Strategy in Action, trying to be a bit more specific a couple of years later. That in turn was followed by the Space Industrial Plan, which was very deliberately trying to address the concerns of industry. What does this mean for us now as the commercial space sector? I think that's when I started
to get a bit lost. I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, and then since then we've had the industrial strategy overall. So the UK's industrial strategy, where space features quite heavily. It's one of the frontier industries.
That's right.
Fortunately, the way space features in the industrial strategy isn't too different from the space industrial plan that preceded it. So there's a line of continuity going through it, which is to be welcomed. But yeah, there's a lot of policy floating around if you want to look for it. And I mean, sort of hot off the press, I think probably a lot of people in the industry will know this, but there will be a new space document of some description, publication from this government. Everything that's been produced so far came from the previous government, apart from that industrial strategy. But there'll be a new space kind of update publication in the new year
to look forward to. I suppose the other big thing we should talk about now actually is there's been a big political change. The UK Space Agency has merged. So why don't we talk a little bit about what that is? Because for me, the UKSA, UK Space Agency, it's only just happened, like about 5 minutes ago.
10 years old or something like that. Yeah, maybe a little bit older.
Something like that. It was really weird. This is slightly off the beaten track, but I was at an event at the Houses of Parliament then, and I can't remember what it was. It was a space drinks thing. And then suddenly a bunch of us all got kind of ushered into this special room where we sat down.
Right.
And it was the inaugural announcement of this new thing called the UK Space Agency. And we had to go around a table explaining why we were there. And I wasn't meant to be there. I was sort of there by accident.
You'd snuck in.
Well, I think by mistake. And I sort of said, I'm a television presenter. Sorry, I shouldn't be here.
Did they let you stay?
They did let me stay, but they said, don't mention anything because it's all a big secret.
It's all top secret.
Yeah. But anyway, so the UKSA is now no longer, and it's been merged by the Department of DSIT.
It's on its way back in. So it will be finalised by April of next year.
Yeah.
And we'll retain the branding. So there will still be a UK Space Agency, but it will now be sitting within DSIT, within the Science Department.
So DSIT is the Department of
Science, Innovation and Technology. Yeah.
Okay. Which presumably was something else 5 minutes ago.
It's been biz. So,
this is the thing. I'm like, I can't keep up.
Bays. Yeah. So there's a space team in DSIT at the moment.
Yeah.
Much smaller than the agency team. And that space team has been responsible for setting strategy and policy. The UK Space Agency, in its current form as an executive agency, an executive body, i.e. its chief exec has executive powers. The Space Agency has been there to deliver that strategy and policy. And it does that primarily, not exclusively, as a strategic funder. So it distributes funding to different programs and activities. By pulling the agency back into DSIT, it loses that executive function, but what it means is that the ministers are closer to it, I guess, so that they can probably have a bit more control over it.
Is it a good thing?
So I think
in the world of everything changing every 2 seconds.
Look, a purely personal view for me is I think, yes, it is. I think some of the coverage of it painted it as a negative, a kind of reduction in the UK's commitment to space. I think the UK is really committed to space. I think the minister at the time, Chris Bryant, he's since been reshuffled, was pretty clear about how much of a priority space was, and it's in the industrial strategy, which we'll talk about later. So I think it is a commitment. What bringing it back into the department does is, first of all, it removes some layers of duplication, and it removes some of the back office functions and duplication there as well, and it probably improves coordination. So, for example, we know that UK government is interested in certain capability areas, certain five aspects of space that it thinks are important. So ISAM, which we talked about before, in orbit, servicing, assembly and manufacture. space domain awareness, knowing what's where up in space, PNT, satellite communications, Earth observation. It thinks these are important. We've had leads for those capabilities in both DSIT and the Space Agency. So it's kind of like two people doing a really, really similar job. And they've done a great job. They've been coordinated, but by having everyone under the same roof as part of the same team now, I think there's an opportunity to make that run even better. And just quickly, the final point is that government really wants a one government approach to space now. So it's not just DSIT and the agency working better together. They want to make sure that they're working better with DEFRA, the Environment Department, Department for Transport, Department for Culture, Media and Sport on connectivity policy and things like that. So it's trying to join it up right across government through this central team, not just the kind of two teams affected by the merger.
There does seem to be a kind of a worry that it's this merger makes it feel like it's been watered down. It sort of stresses a lack of commitment. But you're saying the opposite.
I think the opposite. Yeah, I think on balance, I think it should be a good thing. I hope.
Okay, let's talk about what the government sort of long-term strategy for space is. I mean, we've mentioned some of these documents that have come out on the last sort of few years. Do you see a commitment from the government to push space as something really critical?
Yeah, so I've kind of been in and around government relations, government affairs for a long time. So an old colleague of mine used to tell me to watch which direction the feet were going in, and not just watch what the lips were sort of moving, what the mouth was saying. But if you take at face value at the moment what government's been doing, a really strong industrial strategy with a strong presence for space. Clear mentions of space in the Strategic Defence Review coming out of the MOD.
Yeah, can we talk about defence? Because obviously, like, defence is so important at the moment, given where we are. Where in defence does space sort of fit in?
Yeah,
given where we are particularly with Ukraine and
so we have Space Command, which is the UK kind of military space defence-based space leadership team, and that's right across the armed forces. So. The previous officer in charge of Space Command was from the Air Force. The current one, Major General Tedman, is from the Army. He used to be a helicopter pilot. And they're looking at defence space needs. What do they want to do with space from a defence point of view? And that could cover everything from resilient satellite communications technology for the troops in the field, similarly resilient position, navigation and timing technology. And that extends out then into not just space activities, but for drones and autonomous vehicles in combat as well. We've also got defence and security satellites up there. So Skynet is our defence satellite communications network. And we want to be clear that we can protect those assets in space as well. So there's an element to which now space itself is, in the jargon, it's what they're calling a warfighting domain.
Well, that's what I was wondering. I mean, occasionally you hear new headlines about satellites being taken out by Russian lasers or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Are we going to be in a situation where space as a domain would trigger an Article 5 situation? And I'm trying to just get an idea of how important the space domain is now.
It's possible. It's possible. I think people are well aware of the effect of creating debris in space and the fact that could, wipe out an awful lot of satellites in low Earth orbit. But it's absolutely possible that countries may choose to remove other countries' satellites or blind them or dazzle them or interrupt their communications, because that then has such an effect on the terrestrial battlefield. It has an effect on the troops on the ground. So, it is, as I say in the jargon, it is a warfighting domain now.
Are there you mentioned things like PNT and in-orbit service and manufacture. Are there specific things you think the UK space industry does better than anyone else, or areas that we can really have leadership in?
Yeah, so those would be two of them, satellite communications and PNT. I think small satellite manufacturing, we're definitely leading the way in. We've absolutely got an opportunity to lead in ISAM, in orbit servicing and manufacturing, albeit there's lots of disciplines contained within ISAM.
Yeah.
Do we want to be assembling large superstructures in space, be it power stations, solar power stations, or pharma R&D plants? Do we want to be removing debris?
That seems to be an area that we talk about a lot.
It's. Look, I'm not a space engineering expert, but it's kind of it's positioned really as an enabling step. So if you can do debris removal, you can move on to doing rendezvous proximity operations, so satellites docking effectively with one another to refuel, repurpose, reposition. If you can do that, then you can move on to building things in space. So you can start connecting things together a bit like Lego. And you can build your giant power station or your giant data center. Yeah.
One of the areas as well as we talk a lot about, certainly for the last few years, is launch capabilities in the UK.
Yeah.
We still haven't launched anything.
Yeah.
When, where, how determined is the government to get that off the ground?
I think it's very determined. It wants its own launch capability. Others will know better than I do the timelines on that, I'm afraid. But it's absolutely a priority, both for civil and defence purposes, that we want our own launch capability.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of work is going into that. It would be launching from Saxavor to be a polar orbit.
This is up in Shetland.
Absolutely. So then you're looking at the ability to, and that polar orbit works really, really well for certain uses. It's quite handy for Earth observation, for example.
Yeah.
But for other reasons, other things, you might then want a logistics capability in space to position what you've just launched in exactly the right spot.
Yeah.
So I think these are all things that the boffins in government are scratching their heads about at the moment.
Do the boffins in government, are they all space nerds? Do they all, I'm
Some.
Are they into it?
Yeah, they are. So I think it's, you've got a lot of people coming through the civil service route and by definition tend to be generalists because they get posted every few years for career development. They move, but I think that the DSIT space team have been excellent and they've hung around. So most of them have actually done a good 3 or 4 years, which is about as old as the DSIT space team is in its current format. There's always been spacing somewhere in a government department. So doing a 4-year stint in the space team in DSIT or whatever the science department's been called over the last few years is actually quite you're an old hand if you've stayed that long in government. Yeah. That's a pretty good posting. Yeah.
And how committed is the government, or not the specific government, but governments generally, in terms of promoting space to the commercial sector?
Yeah, I think we can go into a bit more detail on the industrial strategy later in the conversation, but it's one of those frontier industries. And by that, the government means it's found industries that it thinks can drive growth in the UK economy. And the ambition in the industrial strategy, the kind of top level overarching ambition, is that we want to be one of the world's leading exporters of space data and technology. And we want more companies with who are generating £10 million in revenue every year. So I think government is committed to trying to build a space sector in the UK that's a kind of bigger, slightly different shape than it is at the moment. We've got an awful lot of small companies that don't turn over much money.
Yes.
And a lot of them don't have too much ambition to turn over much more money. And that's fine. They're technology houses and they're developing their technology and they tend to be R&D driven. Government's really, really keen to see some of these companies start to scale up, to create growth, create jobs, generate exports. And that comes through clearly in the industrial strategy.
Well, let's talk about the industrial strategy then.
Sure.
Give us a little bit of a primer of what we can expect.
It was kind of heralded when the new government first came into office. It's their attempt to fix the productivity problem in the UK and generate growth in GDP, gross domestic product. They ran a consultation, so a green paper consultation, inviting responses from anyone and everyone. And then the industrial strategy was published earlier in the year. And it's divided into what they call 8 sector plans. And they've come up with this IS8, so the industrial strategy 8 sectors. They're not industry sectors in the way that most people would recognize them. So one is called advanced manufacturing. That obviously covers lots of industries. That's the one where space sits in the main. There's one called digital and technologies. So space sits there a little bit because satellite communications plays into that kind of digital and telecoms policy area. But then there's a section on life sciences, there's a section on professional services, there's a section on defence, or a sector on defence. So you have this IS8. Each of those IS8 sectors has their own detailed sector plan underneath it. And those sector plans contain frontier industries. And for space and advanced manufacturing, that means we're next to automotive, we're next to aerospace and industries like that.
Yeah.
and government setting out its ambitions and its plans to try and support those sectors, those industries, and get them growing.
Yeah.
So that's what it's for. It's designed to set out how government can help industry start to improve productivity and grow the economy.
Yeah. And so does it have a kind of forecast? Are they sort of looking ahead to thinking, okay, we want to be in this particular situation in 10 years' time, we want to be bringing in this amount of growth we want?
Not in that document. I'm sure government does have targets. It tends not to like to talk about them in that sense, because if it misses them, it makes it look like they haven't done a good job.
Yes, I've noticed that.
But it talks about what the government will do to help. So it talks about new funding routes. It talks about new areas of focus. It talks about the relationship with local authorities, for example, the mayoral combined authorities who are getting money for innovation. So it's really government's plans, priorities, and ways in which it wants to help industries grow.
Yeah. How can we market space better? Not just for the general public, but for investors and for companies. Do you think space as a concept is being sold as it should be?
It's a tricky one because space isn't really one industry. And I think one of the challenges with the marketing or the storytelling around it is for space to reach its customers. And it's a B2B industry a lot of the time. So do financial services companies know what they can get from space?
Exactly.
The transports and logistics companies know what they can get from space. Some do. But
can governments learn from companies like SpaceX and forget about the politics of Elon Musk for a moment, but they're really good at the story.
Yeah.
Everyone's heard of SpaceX. We see Starship and everyone knows about Starlink and all these kinds of things. Are we learning enough from the commercial sector in terms of that get up and go? And
yeah, I think it's a challenge. So I think space is an engineering, technically led sector by and large. If you look at a lot of the founders, they've got a deep engineering, deep tech background. Yeah. I saw this in life sciences as well. You often had scientists setting up smaller companies. There's a learning curve there to go on to be able to pitch to investors, to be able to pitch to customers and win customer contracts. Typically, we're very, very strong on describing the technology, what it does and how to improve it. We're maybe a bit less strong on turning it into a product or explaining the return on investment that a customer might get. It's actually one of the areas that the Catapult already helps companies with, a lot of kind of considering what the user's needs are and putting things in the user's language. And it's something we're going to double down on now because we've been quite good at helping companies start up and start to grow. What we realize now is we need to stay with those companies and help them scale up. We need to help them export.
So you said that so scaling up seems to be a priority.
Yes, definitely.
Moment.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is this 10 million in revenue point, and that's just a reflection of where we're starting from. I think other industries would be more ambitious, but getting a clutch of 10 million revenue businesses in the UK would be fantastic. And to do that, you're going to need to attract new investment, which means we've got to tell the right story to different investors. And you probably need to look at generating exports or become part of overseas supply chains.
Yes.
Because the UK market alone probably isn't going to create any space unicorns. Those companies are going to have to tap into international markets.
When you say space unicorns, I immediately visualized
a flying space unicorn. Just have $1 billion.
What do we mean by just for
$1 billion companies?
$1 billion company. Okay, and presumably mergers as well. I'm thinking of other think tanks like Tech UK and Is that a?
It's a really good point. I think if you look at maybe the Earth observation part of the space sector, there's an awful lot of smallish companies with maybe one or two products. So they just look at a forest maybe and count the trees in a forest, or they just look at the state of the coast around a particular area. And you've got an awful lot of those companies doing their one or two things. Again, in my background in life sciences, you would start to see merger and acquisition activity. I'm old enough to remember when GlaxoSmithKline was Glaxo and SmithKline. And in fact, Glaxo was Glaxo Wellcome, and before that it was
I'm old enough to remember when Mercedes-Benz was just Mercedes.
Right.
No, I wasn't. I'm not that old. Actually, so how long have you been working in space now?
2 years.
2 years. Okay, here's a question for you. And you've come from lots of different areas.
Yeah.
Life sciences and other corporate areas. What is the thing that is driving you crazy at the moment? Because everyone, whatever there's always something that's like, why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing this?
Yeah.
In the space industry,
Yeah.
what's the thing that you think we could be doing better or could be more nimble at? Or
so the challenge, I think, is that we are R&D-led and therefore grant funded.
Right.
And grants tend to be reasonably short term, so in business timelines, a few years, and they're focused on building technology, building better and better technology. I think if you talk to some of the investors, for example, that we speak to, they will say they work with companies and say, it's good enough now, just get out and sell it. Mm-hmm. I think the sector is on the path to becoming commercial and looking to win commercial contracts, but it's still got a way to go.
Is there going to be like a thing that'll happen that will supercharge that? For example, launch or something that's going to really make that shift happen?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I don't know is the honest answer, but I could imagine that there could be a few different ways that this kind of thing could happen. So I definitely think the kind of renewed interest in defence and defence spending and a kind of more rapid approach to defence procurement could stimulate the sector, especially in the UK.
Have you noticed that? I mean, obviously there was, in the last sort of few months, we've had this, we have to start spending 5% of GDP on defence. And everyone's been a little bit cagey about how that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But have you noticed that already in the space sector? People talking about, how can we...
Well, so the Strategic Defence Review and the Defence Sector Plan, apologies for the slightly jargony, but that's what they're actually called. Those two bits of policy have, for example, committed, I think, 400 million in spending from UK defence innovation. That's effectively a new procurement pot. And it's come up with a 3-track approach to procuring things for defence, so not just space, a kind of fast track, a slightly slower track, and a medium track. And you as a space company can work out where your tech would sit in that. And there's a pot of money ready to go, that you could potentially access. And that is procurement rather than R&D funding. So I think that's one area that could stimulate growth. I think another is, as ISAM matures, I think we're probably still 5 or 10 years away from that really becoming mature, but that will have an effect all the way down the supply chain. So I think things like that could have a huge effect. And then the multiplier will be that lots of countries are now looking at what they need to do in space. And so there is a real opportunity for the UK to export and tap into foreign markets and hopefully generate growth for great British businesses via that route.
Are we doing enough? This is my kind of wrap-up question. Are we doing enough?
I think it feels like there's always more that you could do. I'm finding the international aspects and the potential for exports and to help British companies set up overseas without losing them overseas. Yeah. I'm finding that really, really interesting. So I think there's always more that you can do. I think if government can become more joined up and buy a bit better, that would be really, really interesting. And then I think the other role I suppose that government can play is around regulation. And you've got the Space Act, which tells you that you've got to have a license to put things in space and to cover what you're doing.
We're good at regulations in the UK. I kind of think that's an area like law and regulation generally in terms of...
And it can be stimulating for the sector.
Yeah.
So we can create a situation where the regulations send a signal to investors that your company's worth investing in because you've passed some regulatory hurdles. So you're de-risked, and the investors think, well, you're maybe a better bet than a company that hasn't done that. I also think if you look at new regulations around greenhouse gas emissions and preserving biodiversity, preserving nature, space companies can really help with that. Earth observation companies can really, really help with that. So if you get those regulations right, you can stimulate uptake of space data and analytics and tools, and then those companies will grow there while helping the environment, while achieving your objectives.
So you've been in the space sector for a couple of years. I'm interested in you came from life sciences, but you mentioned you worked at Coca-Cola and other big sort of corporate companies. Are there kind of things that you learned from your work in other big corporations, other big sectors that can be applied to the space sector?
Yes. So I think being really, really clear-eyed on your business model, how to communicate it and what it is that you're trying to do
Well, you're a communications expert, so are we? Well, okay.
Yeah, I am. No, I am. Yeah.
But are we communicating well enough? Is that a hindrance at the moment?
Yeah, I think it is.
Do you think we could be doing better?
Well, I think it is, because I think we talk about the technology. I don't think we talk about the benefit.
And the benefit is the story.
Yeah.
And actually, I bang on about this a lot, but all story, in whether it's drama or whether it's factual, whether it's about the quest for a solution. It's about trying to.
There's an arc, isn't there?
There's an arc. There's a story. Like somebody wants to do something. If you're writing a scientific paper, it's like we've noticed something, and this is how we want to find something out, and that's the story. We like that as humans. We kind of respond to
absolutely
to those arcs, if you like.
Absolutely.
Beginnings, middles, and ends.
I'm a scientist, and I've spent a lot of time trying to convince people over the years in different roles and different jobs and working with different clients and companies. I've tried to convince people using statistics.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work.
And that's.
I really want it to work, but it doesn't work.
That's the thing with climate science, for example. Scientists love to tell us all the statistics, but humans don't. That's not how we
need a story. We need a story that goes
because
with
we
it.
respond with kind of values. And that's why things like climate science has become so politicized, because suddenly it's become a value-laden thing.
Yeah.
And it's like, well,
Yeah. I mean, it's been wrapped up in political identity and things like that. But
exactly.
so I think for space, it's if you're sitting there as a potential customer, if you're working in a bank or a charity looking after a forest or parts of nature, or if you're working in a transport company, what are you wrestling with? What's your problem? What's your bugbear? I wish there was a better way of doing this. Can space come in and help with that? Can space tell you the story that says, we see that problem and we can help you do it better, and we can make your life a bit easier as a result of it? Certainly that's the way we're trying to think increasingly within the Catapult. What are the challenges that these businesses, be they the space business or the customer, what are they facing, and how can we help?
Mark, thanks so much for coming in. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you. And just before we go, are we in sort of good shape, do you think, the space industry in the UK in terms of governments?
I'm optimistic.
Yes, that's the word.
I like the industrial strategy. I think that the sector has some incredible businesses in it. I love going out and hearing their stories.
Yeah, there are some great stories.
Brilliant stories.
People doing amazing
really,
stuff.
really exciting, amazing things. The challenge now is to really get on and make them successful. I said before, it's one thing to look at what the lips are saying, another thing to look at which direction the feet are moving in.
Yeah,
we've got to get going in the right direction now. We've got to help these businesses grow, but there's a real opportunity there.
Great. Well, listen, thank you very much for coming in. It's been
thank you for having
me.
Pleasure.
Thank you for rounding off our series on a.
I hope it was a highlight. A
massive highlight on an optimistic note.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So there we go. That's it. That is our series finale, for this series at least, of In Orbit. And it's been an incredible series. We've had some fantastic guests here at the Harwell campus, here at the heart of the space industry here at the UK. We've covered everything from, autonomy, microgravity, greenhouse gases, robotics, investment, connectivity, and everything in between. We're going to be taking a short break, but if you want to hear future episodes of In Orbit, and of course if you want to catch up with some old favourites, be sure to subscribe on your favourite podcast app, whatever that might be. And of course you can head to YouTube to watch video versions of all of our conversations. And of course, if you want to understand how space is empowering your industry, you can visit the Satellite Applications Catapult's website or visit them on social media.